Washington Post posted these studies a long time ago. You show them sometimes these graphs. One of them is 28% of men showing zero sexual partners between the time
GSS studies.
the GSS studies. Can we go over some of those? Because I show these to women and they're just like, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Every guy knows a whore. Every guy knows fucks.
Make sure you get all of them. Make sure you got all of them.
What are you talking about? The fucking VIP host I had sex with, he hasn't had 7 sexual partners. He's had 700. What are you talking about? And I'm like, hey, did you look at the guy who gave you your hamburger at Wendy's? Who's fucking him? Did you look at
Who's his soulmate?
Who's his soulmate? Did you look at the person, the cashier at Walmart? Would you have had sex with him? No, not only would you not have had sex with him, you didn't notice he existed. So invisible. When I show you this whole thing, 28% of men having 0 sexual partners in the last year, and you don't believe it, these 28% of men, you legitimately don't recognize they exist. You wonder where Andrew Tate came from? It's because you ignored that they existed. Let's say everything Andrew Tate said is wrong and everything Red Pill is wrong. Let's just play devil's advocate. All of it's wrong. You think that these people just don't exist? You're going to wave your hand as a feminist and be like, well, fuck you, I don't agree with your opinion, therefore you disappear? Do you think they disappeared? Do you think that they don't have internet access? Do you think that they don't vote? They have no economic guidance whatsoever. Do you think that they don't have feelings, that they don't have testosterone, they don't have muscles, they don't have the ability to work, the ability to type?
Sounds a lot like female solipsism, doesn't it?
I mean, it's just a situation where, like, you have to admit that they existed. Now, let's go over these studies specifically. The one had to do with virginity, 27% of men. What was that? It was like between the 18 and 30. What was, do you remember those studies?
Okay, so the study was between, I want to say it was 2008 and 2018.
Yeah.
So, and it was part of the General Survey study, which is like an American, so this is the United States here, okay? And it corresponds with the census at the time as well. So they take that every 10 years, as we know. So the stats basically show this, is that it was like 28% of men between 2008 and 2018 are literally having no sex, zero. Like no sexual partners, and it has astronomically risen since about 2010.
Well, 2007 is when you first see the hockey stick spike, and that is the year that the Facebook app was introduced to the iPhone.
It's also the year when white women started taking antidepressants at astronomical numbers as well. If you look at the spike in that, and what I've done, by the way, I have used that. Everybody in the manosphere has used that.
Yeah.
That stat. But what they don't do, that's one data point.
Yeah.
Okay. You have to take those data points and you have to like correlate them with other data points. So even from the same study, you can see that, and that's just 18 to 29. If you go and you look past 29 up until 45, men are still having less sex, even in those other demographics. We don't care. Once you're past the 29 demographic, who gives a shit, right? But we see that, and we see that astronomical spike because those ones are the people those are the guys who are going to have the Arab Spring, right? But then when you look at women, and you see that it's jumped just a little bit. They're having less sex, but not nearly as much as like young men in the same demographic cohort, right? So when you look at that, how do we correlate, or how do we interpret that one data point? I interpret it as this, is that we have, of course, we're in a social media environment right now. We're in a sexual marketplace that is globalized sexual marketplace. Yeah. We can literally see statistically hypergamy right there. Okay, so what happens is, it depends on what your ideological bent is. So when I have heard like Matt Walsh or PragerU report these exact same numbers, you know what they're saying? Oh, it's because young women are fucking older guys. It's because they're having sex with older men who are more made, and they're more mature and whatever. And what that does is it feeds into the personal responsibility grift that they all promote. So it's like, well, if men would just take more responsibility and get off their asses and start being better, then women would be better and you'd be getting laid, right? No. Women are sharing the hot alphas is what the fuck they're doing. Yeah. How about we talk about that? You'll never hear that from Dennis Prager. You will never hear that from Daily Wire. You will never have that correlation made because it is unflattering to female nature. And we all think that to solve men's problems is to pile on more and more responsibility for those guys without having any authority in that as it is. But still, it points a really ugly finger at hypergamy being true. Here it is right here. It's not that these women want to fuck old dudes on yachts. They're fucking guys, and they're sharing that guy. Yeah. So we're and I made this point before. We were talking about promiscuity, and that's where I did the show on Tim Burkhead's book, and I talked about this. I said we're at a stage right now in society where women don't need men. They'll say this openly.
Sure.
I don't need no man. I make my own money. I'm walk like the boss and talk like the boss, you know? And they're very proud and very, it's hubris is what it is. They get to that point and they say, I don't need no man, but I want a man. Okay, what kind of man do you want? I want the guy who looks like Andrew Tate. I want the guy who looks like Jason Momoa. I want the guy who's going to give me the highest, hottest fucking sex I can get, who is the apex alpha, and hopefully I'll be able to lock him down. But if I can't, I'm more than willing to share that guy, either directly or indirectly, whether I cop to it or I don't. And so what you're seeing right now is you're seeing a reversal and a sort of a return to polygamy, but it's not men that are doing it. It's women who see that as the only choice for the men they want to get with, because they don't need those beta men who are in that 28% right there. They don't need those guys anymore for provisioning, protection, or parental investment, because either they've got a college degree, they've got a business degree, they've got a business themselves, they've pretty much settled, or perceptually, they've settled the idea that I don't need a man for the beta buck side of hypergamy. So the only thing that's left is fucking Jason Momoa and the cannon party.
So let's talk about this. Women are always shocked whenever I bring this up, right? The average North American male has had 7 sexual partners in his entire life. So let's look at this from a statistical standpoint. We know that first 28% of men are at 0, right? And then when we get to the average, the mean, we're at 7. So let's keep graphing this out. Now we're at 7. Let's just say this top 60th percentile, we have had 7 sexual partners. Once we get to the 80th percentile, we're talking 400 sexual partners. Once we get to the 90th percentile, we're talking about like Bilzerian, we're talking about 1,400, 1,500 sexual partners. For men, it looks like a hockey stick. It literally goes like flat, and then it's a little bit, and then once you get above this certain style where you're like in the top 10% of earners, you're good looking, whatever, the number of sexual partners happens. I'm not trying to be an asshole, and I'm not trying to be arrogant. Let me tell you from firsthand experience, this is absolutely true, because I've been on both sides of the scale. It's not, you don't have a few more partners. It is unbelievably, it's 10-to-1 difference. So when you see this spike that happens, I don't blame women for this. I understand. What happens is, let's look at Amazon. Remember back in 1985, we would go to the hardware store for our hardware. We would go to the diaper store. We would go to a different store. We'd go to the nursery for our plant shit. We would go to different stores for different things.
And go to Blockbuster for our videos.
Blockbuster for our videos. Now we go to Amazon for everything. So we see how the internet globalized purchasing. Now we almost all go to one place for all of our shit. Why do you think that was going to happen any differently with dating? Of course, it's the same thing. Okay, I'm telling you. I was talking to Bilzerian. He said like something like 50% of the women he's been with are in relationships. Currently in relationships when they have sex with him. Like this idea that like it really is like what you said before. There is this group of men at the top that are having all the sexual access, and then there's this group of men at the bottom who aren't. And this is not a cultural thing. This has happened throughout history.
Biological, evolutionary.
Evolutionary. Mubarak the bloodthirsty, 888 children. You know what I'm talking about, right? From Morocco. Read about him. This whole idea. Now here's the thing. Here's where I differ from a lot of guys. Okay, not all of them, but that 28%. My whole thing is, don't hate the game. Get in the fucking gym.
Get in the game. Be a player and not an average dude.
Know that if this top 10% is the one that's winning, do everything in your power short of death to get there. How much does it mean to you to get in that top 10%? Nobody loves women more than me. Women are the way they are. You can tell me women like status and like guys who are taller than shorter. Have I gone to a party, been with a hot girl, and she walks off with some dude who's a male stripper? Of course it's happened to me. It sucks. Doesn't make me hate women. It's just evolution.
You got swooped on.
I got swooped on. So you know what? I'm going to hit that motherfucking bench press next week. And
Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better.
Yeah, wish you were better. Don't wish it was easier, because it's not easier. If you wish it easier, that's when I see these dudes, like I said before, moving to Panama, moving to fucking Eastern Europe, and they're just, I don't want to give up. But you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. And so as I was saying before, when you look at, I've done several shows on the GSS study. When you look at those stats, you have to correlate them against other stats that really, like you say, okay, it was 2008 to 2018. What else happened during that time? Well, if you look at how college enrollment rates have declined for men and have skyrocketed for women. And by the way, I think one of the big mistakes that we make right now is I always hear the stat of how it's 60% women and 40% men in college enrollment. Yes, enrollment, not in graduation. Enrollment. And we're having this conversation now because Biden decided he wanted to forgive like $10,000 of student debt, which of course 2/3 of that is owned by women. Okay. But that's for graduation. If you look at graduation rates, my daughter just graduated from UNLV, right? She's got a master's degree. I went and I looked at the stats, you know, being me, right, to see what the gender differential was. It was like 68 or almost 70% women and 30% guys were graduating with a master's or above, like a doctorate as well. And I thought, well, that kind of like puts things into a different perspective. It's one thing if you're going in there and you're enrolling, did you complete it? Well, there's 60% women and 40% men. All right. Did you go through it? Okay, you went through 4 years of college. You went through 8 years of college.
So men are dropping out.
Are dropping out, exactly.
Wow.
So you have to look at those stats and then compare that versus the same time period as we see an increase in guys not getting laid, right? And then you have to look at other like sort of demographic cohort studies that go along with that. And this is straight out of Dr. David Buss's book, okay? 80% of men are deemed unattractive by women online, on Hinge, Bumble, Tinder, seeking arrangements, whatever on dating
top
things.
10% of men on Tinder are getting 63% of the right swipes, and I believe the top 20% were getting it's like something like a 78 or 80% of the right swipes. The top 20% were getting 80% of the right swipes on Tinder.
So the mistake is this is that we call this the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule, right? Okay, so the mistake is to think this is that 20% of guys are fucking 80% of the women. No, that's not it, dumbass. Okay, 100% of women want to get with the top 20% of guys. That leaves 80% of guys who are the invisible ones, who are the sandwich artists, who that women are completely oblivious to because they are unattractive. They are not, maybe he'll do. They are, I wouldn't even recognize his existence, right?
Yeah.
So you've got 80% of guys who are never going to get swiped or never going to get a call back or an interest or a wave back or whatever the fuck it is. So you got 80, those are the 80%ers. That's why I always say the 80%ers, like the beta males, are 80%ers, right? So then you got the 20%ers who are the maybe. He's not unattractive, but he's not necessarily attractive. It's just like, he's interesting enough that I would want to go meet that guy. Let's see if he's got what it takes. Then there are the 4.5% of guys that women will actively...
Are you talking about 2 standard deviations? Is that why you picked 4.5%?
No, I didn't pick it. This is actually straight out of David Buss's research. And Rob Henderson, Steve Stewart Williams, David Buss, and I can't remember who else.
Do you remember the 1 standard deviation is 68.2%?
Yeah.
2 standard deviations is 95.5%, which means outside of 2 standard deviations would be 4.5%.
So
by the way, 4.5% of the population is also homosexual. 4.5%, there's a bunch of, 4.5% actually comes out to be a lot of different numbers in a normal distribution.
4.5% of guys are hot enough that women want to swipe and initiate a conversation with them to possibly have sex or possibly have a relationship or get a date. They are the ones that women will initiate with. So you've got the 20%ers, and of the 20%ers that might do, the 4.5% are the guys that are hot enough for women to go, yeah, I want to fuck that guy.
That's the top 20% of the top 20%.
And that's what, of the 4.5%. That's the Justin Wallers. That's the Andrew Tates. That's the guys who are like way up at the apex. That's you. That's the apex. At the apex.
Bro, Justin Waller came out with me. Justin Waller came out with me one time, bro. And I was hanging out with these girls I was talking, and they all just stopped and just stared at Justin Waller. Justin Waller looks like a tight end, bro.
He's tall as fuck. I've been at restaurants with him and watched like just average women go like, yes, sir. Yeah, your table's right over here. But yeah, I can tell you stories about Jay. And that he won't want me to make public. But anyways, so you have the 4.5%ers, and really, when guys tell me, "Oh, I'm not in the 20%," I'm like, it's worse than that, dude. Women aren't actually actively coming to seek you. That is a data point that correlates with the other studies, right? So it also reinforces hypergamy. So when we were talking about the OkCupid studies that say, women at 23 years of age are the peak demographic, and for women, they're looking for a guy in the long term. They're looking for a guy who's anywhere between 3 to 7 years older than them, right? Okay, we can see that from old data, but we can also sort of infer hypergamy from those numbers. We can infer hypergamy from the GSS studies. We can also infer hypergamy from, I'll just say David Buss's research for those percentages. But so we see that women are gravitating towards the top apex guys, the 4.5%ers. How is that affecting those guys in the GSS study who are 28% aren't getting laid? Well, can we infer that the guys who are getting the swipes of the 4.5%, can we infer that those are the guys that maybe the women have been fucking for the last 10 years Instead of, oh, they must want to get with older, more mature guys who have, are more emotionally available and make up some cock and bull rationale around that, rather than just say, you know what? There's two sides to hypergamy. There's alpha fucks and beta bucks. And you want to know why I get frustrated with Buss or with Peterson or anyone else, certainly Hector Garcia. Why do I get frustrated with them? Because they have this mound of fucking evidence. And all the data points to what I've been talking about for the last 20 years. And like, nope, must be older guys, right? Because it fits in with the narrative. I don't want to lose my tenure. I don't want to. I don't blame him. Alienate half of my audience.
But I need him on that wall. I need Dr. Buss on that wall.
Oh, I do too. And I was going to say, as a statistician, as research, I will always quote them. People have given me grief about quoting Pinker before in the past. I'm like, I don't care what he does. I want to know what the freaking data is, and I'm going to make those connections, because what happens is when we have like the alpha fucks and the beta bucks, the other side of that, like when you have Peterson talking about intersexual dynamics, he'll talk about only one side exists. It's only the beta buck side.
Yeah.
Oh, women want men with status. They want men with money. They want guys who are good fathers, who are going to be parentally invested in, reproductive costs and everything like that. But meanwhile, Chad is fucking, all these dudes in the phone, licking the fucking ice cream over here, and you just completely, tunnel vision with blinders on, don't want to see that your little girl wants to fuck the guy on spring break.
Yeah,
she wants that's part of that's the other side of it that you want to ignore, because if you were to address that, you would get canceled, which is what happened to Andrew.
For